Welcome to the Solution Nation podcast. My name is Sean Snowday, and I'm the president of Solution Nation. Solution Nation is dedicated to providing a platform for investors to learn about Israel's most dynamic public and private companies. We interview lead venture capitalists, Wall Street analysts, investment bankers, and managers of incubators and accelerators. Today's guest is Ronnie Hochman-Sussman, and the topic is Israeli aquaculture industry. Now, much of the solution to the world's food insecurity can be found in fish. Fish are more efficient at converting feed to protein than any other animal. No other animal can be raised at a density even approaching that of fish. Unlike raising chicken, pigs, and cows, no efforts need to be undertaken to provision wild fish with water. Please remember that all content provided on the Solution Nation podcast and website is for educational purposes only. Nothing shall be construed as investment advice. Investment decisions shall not be made based on information, written, verbal, or otherwise, posted or spoken on Solution Nation. Conduct your own research or consult with your own investment advisors before making investment decisions. So here's my good friend, the host of the show, and the CEO of Solution Nation, David Wanatik.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solution Nation. I'm David Wanatik, the CEO of Solution Nation. Today, we're going to talk about Israeli aquaculture. Speaking on the subject, our guest is Ronnie Hochman-Sussman. Ronnie is the Aquaculture Tech Managing Director at the Israel Innovation Institute. And previously, Ronnie was a biology specialist at Alga Technologies and a project manager at Hazara Seeds. Ronnie, thank you for joining us.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work in aquaculture?
Yes, of course. So I'm managing a joint venture of Israel Innovation Institute with the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Agriculture, and Innovation Authority, Israel Innovation Authority. And the main goal of this joint venture is to promote aquaculture in Israel. Starting with Israel, and next would be global corporations to promote aquaculture.
Okay, so aquaculture is basically the growing of fish, the breeding of fish, and maybe also algae and so forth, right?
It's not only. It's true that the main goal of aquaculture is food production for the growing population of the world. Aquaculture is the most sustainable food production system for protein, from animal protein food production in the world. It doesn't consume a lot of land, it doesn't consume drinking water, and it doesn't pollute drinking water. And you don't invest as much food feeding fish and seafood as you do in cows, for example, in beef, for example, and you don't need a lot of fields to grow food for fish as you do for beef. Actually, in the world today, 80% of the land used for agriculture is used to grow food for our food, and not directly to grow vegetables for humans, for example. So land use is a very big issue, but I'm going to surprise you maybe. We are dealing with sustainable aquaculture, which means that we don't grow it in the ocean. We are promoting mainly in Israel aquaculture, land-based aquaculture. As you know, the world is going through a desertification process, and growing food with using drinking water on the land is a problem. But if you use seawater on land and you recycle it and you don't do it in the ocean, you gain a few things. You don't pollute the ocean because you don't overfeed and use things in the ocean and just throw waste in the ocean. And actually, you let the wild fishing grow again. I think for the past maybe 20 years, people, the fishing 30 years ago, the fishing was growing and growing, and it stopped. because the ocean can no longer provide naturally humans' need for fish. So producing fish on land is letting the ocean rehabilitate and growing food close to the consumers. So we gain a lot of sustainable goals by doing aquaculture on the land.
Okay, so most of the aquaculture in Israel takes place on the land, big pools, big bodies of water, big containers of water are established on the land, and you grow the fish in those containers.
Yes, but you mentioned before growing mainly fish, but Israel is one of the main aquaculture industries in Israel is not only food. Israel is exporting polysaccharides for the cosmetic industry, is exporting supplements from algae, is exporting a lot of IPs from the academy in Israel. Maybe it's still for 30 years, Israel is leading with the academy IPs exporting. And
IPs, you mean intellectual property?
Yes. Okay. Yes, a lot of the Israelis' investment knowledge is going actually abroad. So Israel is a leading country in the knowledge. Mm-hmm. And one more thing, also medical and pharma industries. In Israel, there are companies that produce bone replacements from corals. So it's not only food, but it's mainly food.
Okay. Well, that's good. You told us what else can be produced through aquaculture. So I understand it's very capital intensive to build these pools of water on land. Mm-hmm. So in the United States, we have a company called Aqua Bounty that's based in Indiana. And mm-hmm. They've said that they're very capital intensive. I was surprised at how capital intensive it is. They have to build roadways, on-site energy infrastructure, land preparation. Then they have to excavate the ground site. They have to lay pipe to provide fresh water, have a lot of electricity. So is it also capital intensive in Israel to develop these on-land aquaculture systems?
It depends. Because for fish tanks, you need to build fish tanks and provide them with a lot of infrastructure. But I think in Israel also solar energy is very strong and very common. So I'm not sure that you use a lot of electricity like in the United States. I'm not sure. In the United States, it's an option like it is in Israel because Israel's main areas are desert. So we have a lot of radiation and a lot of sun days and a very few cloudy days. So it's possible to produce a lot of energy during using solar energy systems. So that's for the energy side. And I think there's a lot of Israeli companies. You mentioned the American company. I can mention Aqua Ma'of, which is an Israeli company that builds those systems around the world. So Aqua Ma'of is one. Pure Blue Fish is another one that builds systems around the world. And the Israeli companies are well known in the world for that. And I also know an algae company in Iceland that is an Israeli company and using I think thermal energy in Iceland, not using electricity, conventional electricity like in the United States. So there's a lot of options to reduce the use of electricity but not only electricity, also land. I think for fish you need fish tanks, but for seafood you need much less. You don't need it as deep and as big as fish. So there's also seafood involved. Mm-hmm. Do you know that Israel is exporting crabs to Vietnam, for example.
That's interesting. We actually had a session on the Israeli-Vietnamese economic ecosystem. So that's interesting. When the power is generated naturally through solar power, does that mean there's less evaporation of the water and less water needs to be replaced in the pools of water?
The main companies that are active around the world, the Israeli companies that I know, are indoors. So there is very minimum evaporation, if any. In the middle of the Israeli desert in Ramat Negev, there is a company called Aquaculture Fisheries, and they grow barramundi fish. And it's indoor. I don't think they suffer from evaporation.
Okay. So you mentioned that fish are very efficient in terms of how much you have to feed them. I think the ratio is like 1 to 1, yes. 1 pound of feed to 1 pound of meat from the fish, whereas other animals it's 4 to 1. So
7 to 1.
Okay, or 7 to 1. But one of the issues with fish is they have a lot of feces, like 50% of what they eat, I think, turns into feces. So what has to be done to clean that, to keep everything clean so there's no diseases that transfer from one fish to another?
So Israel is also leading in that area because a lot of the world's systems today are based on Israeli technologies. So in Israel, the companies that are active are active with a complete recycling system with the biofilters that can take care of the feces and remove it without any problem of reusing the water and still growing healthy fish in it.
Okay. Do the fish behave differently since they're not in a natural environment? Do the fish know that they're not in a natural environment and behave differently? And are there problems with that?
You can't say fish like you can't say people, because there are a lot of kinds of fish. Some are swimming in groups, some are swimming separately. So they are not all the same. Many kinds of fish. Some are better in aquaculture and some don't. Some have great protocols and some are still under development. For example, like tuna. Bluefin tuna is a project conducted in Israel, and it started many years ago. It's a global project that was led by the late Hillel Gorodin, and it's still going on in Spain mainly and other locations in the world. And it still has not been finished. They didn't cultivate it, fully cultivated bluefin tuna yet, but they're working on it like they did on other species. So fish are very different from each other. Bluefin tuna eat each other when they're babies. So little fishes, you can put 100,000 in a tank and remain with one. So you have to solve a lot of problems and maybe try other species. I think today in aquaculture, there are a few species that are very successful, but they are still working on solving a lot of issues with other species.
Are most of the fish in these tanks, are they genetically modified or are they regular fish?
Most of the fish, as far as I know, are not genetically modified, but there's, of course, a lot of research with genetically modified fish.
Okay. Well, I guess one of the other benefits of raising the fish on land is there's no issue of escaping. So I read that when the fish are like in the nets in the ocean, sometimes they escape and cause problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the main problem is with genetically modified fish. The fear with growing them in the ocean, like many countries do, is that they can overcome the natural population. So it's a danger, which you don't have when you grow them on land. of course.
Mm-hmm. So these facilities on land, do the facilities themselves have to be approved by regulators? So if you were to do your work in the United States, would the FDA have to approve the facility?
Yes, of course. I think this is one of the main issues that we are dealing with as a community, because I mentioned in the beginning that Israel was leading 30 years ago. And the past 20 years, it was degrading industry in Israel, if I can use that phrase in English. But more companies were closed in the past 20 years than opened. So I think the main problem in Israel is regulation, and we are dealing with that, of course. It's our main issue to promote aquaculture in Israel, deal with regulations.
Mm-hmm. What kind of efficiencies can aquaculture companies receive in terms of the speed of growing the fish, the weight, more weight of the fish, more meat to sell, less risk of disease, those kinds of things?
So that's a question for the scientific research R&D centers in Israel. Actually, one of the main of them is located in Eilat also, and it's Oceanographic Research Center that had a lot of success in the past. And still today, a lot of development coming out of this research center, or Oceanographic Research Center, are being exported. So it's a question for the science community, actually, and we are supporting them.
So you only raise one type of fish in each container, is that correct? You don't mix them? Okay. 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 Are there any other disadvantages of raising fish in these big containers?
If there are, I can't see them. But I wanted to mention another thing. In the world today, you grow two kinds of fish: predators and non-predators. And the predators are today, unfortunately, still what you use to feed them. Even if you're based on the land, you still feed them with food that you produced from fishing industry. So in Israel, we deal with that too, and we a lot of the research is focusing on alternative feed systems. So it's also an issue. If you grow the fish on the land, you should also stop fishing for them. In Israel, the main companies that grow fish and feed them if they are predators, because predators are still popular and very healthy fish altogether. So in Israel, we grow some fish as food for the fish that you grow for people. We don't fish for the food for the fish in Israel.
Okay, so you grow the fish that end up as food for the other fish.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Also in pools on the land.
Okay. Anything you want to say about how it helps to grow fish on land as far as getting the fish to market? So if somebody's sitting in Texas and they eat salmon that comes from Norway or Chile, many times I think it's flown in by air, right, which is very expensive. Yes. So anything you want to say about how you might help the supply chain by growing fish on land?
Of course, it's one of the goals. The world have come to understand, especially during the Corona time, that we pollute too much, and producing food close to the customers is saving a lot of. They call it today a carbon footprint. we are saving the carbon footprint by producing the food close to the consumers. So it's a healthy, available, and it also in Israel, it touches a sensitive spot of food security for a local population. Unfortunately, in Israel, we had security sensitive times that also harmed the food supply. So producing food close to the customers can make you, can assure you that you will always have the possibility to grow your own food, especially if you grow the food for the food. And keep as much local production as you can assure you that you'll have supply.
Do you think most of the production, let's say in 10 years, there's a lot of land, aquaculture. Do you think most of that will actually take place on existing farmlands, or is it the kind of thing that can go into industrial parts of big cities or on the outskirts of big cities?
I think both, because the population is growing dramatically. I think by 2050, there's going to be about 10 billion, something like that. And you have to supply them with food, with animal protein, as people consume it today. You have to produce it somewhere, somehow, and growing cattle or beef is not the solution. It's a polluted systems, polluting methods, and we don't have enough land for that, and we don't have enough looking in the future. We can't go on like that.
Well, how much time is there between the time a fish is harvested, a fish is ready to be sold, and before it has to be eaten?
From months to years. It depends on the fish that you aim for. So it's very diverse. I can't say for all fish the same. Some fish grow them.
So there's a long shelf life. You have months to even years. So there's no urgency in getting that fish.
You can't call it shelf life because you grow them in the tank. Some you grow them for a few months, and some you grow them for a few years. So it's not really shelf life. Shelf life starts the minute you take them out of the tank. As long as they're growing, it's not shelf life, actually. It's growing time.
So, okay. So from the time they're done growing and ready to sell fish, how much time is there before it is no longer safe to eat?
It depends, because in Israel today we import most of the seafood is imported from China, and not only Israel. The main country that produces seafood in the world is China. So and they export it frozen. So when you export something frozen, you have a long shelf life. If you want something fresh, it's a matter of days.
Mm-hmm. Are there any byproducts that are problematic? So if you put a fish farm close to a big city, are there any concerns? Is a lot of ammonia produced, or anything hazardous?
No, but the prettiest thing that I gave you an example before with aquatic fisheries. So aquatic fisheries handle their water, recycle most of it, and some of the concentrated ammonia-rich water are being transferred for irrigation in olive fields, olive trees. So it's wonderful to see it. It's a complete system that is not harming anyone. So you grow the fish, and you use the debris and all the waste. You use it I lost the word, but you use it to grow plants. And
fertilizer.
Yeah, and also in the Arava we have aquaponics. So they're using also the same water that they grow fish in. They're using to grow lettuce. So the lettuce are using this ammonia.
Okay, good. Well, why hasn't fish farming on land taken off faster? It sounds great. It sounds like it should be pretty prevalent all over. I know strides are being made in Israel, but it's still not that common. What's holding it up?
First thing is costs. You need a lot of investments for the infrastructure that you mentioned in the beginning, but it costs a lot of money. It's much easier to put a net, sorry, in the water and just grow your fish there and take the net out. It's much easier. And I think COVID really changed the consumption for carbon footprint, because before COVID, I think export and import was promoted all over the world, and it stopped. When the possibility stopped, people realized that it's possible to do it differently. You need investments, and I think countries need to invest in the infrastructure to provide entrepreneurs with possibilities, regulations and possibilities to use land and to supply them with the basic infrastructure that a company like that needs. But countries do understand that. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture is investing 170 million shekels in aquaculture in the next 5 years. So Israel understands that. I think around the world too.
Some of the companies you mentioned: Aquatech Fisheries, Pure Blue Fish, Aquaphonics, and Aquamouth. M-O-T-H.
Mouth. M-O-T.
Okay.
M-O-F. Sorry, mouth.
Okay. Okay. And the Icelandic company, is that also involved in aquaculture?
It grows algae, microalgae.
Okay. What's the name of that company?
Waxalife.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think you have to run, unfortunately. So I guess we have to end this session. But Ronnie, it was a real pleasure to have you with us. We really appreciate you educating us on aquaculture in Israel. Thank you very much.
Before I leave, I'll mention that on October, we have the first Israeli summit on food from the sea and the desert. And a lot of the companies that I mentioned are going to come to this summit as speakers and presenters. And there's going to be a startup exhibition during this summit. And I think that a lot of the Israeli technology is going to be exposed in that summit. So everyone is welcome to join. It's Agri-Israel See the Future Summit.
Great. So people can contact Ronnie Hoffman-Sussman for further information. Thank you very much, Ronnie. It's a pleasure having you here.
You're welcome.
All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.